Well, today I'm making my no-knead ciabatta bread. Yeah, I don't even know if it's a ciabatta bread. That's the recipe I'd gotten offline, but I've changed it a few times. This recipe calls for 4 cups of flour, the flour really can be any kind of flour. I use my high gluten pizza flour. I think it's got a, turns out I actually love it that way. You could use an all-purpose flour. This recipe is not really that precise. That's the greatest thing about it. I use kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, and then we use just your instant yeast. I use in the wintertime a little more. It calls for a 1/4 teaspoon. In the wintertime, I use just a little more. It's down in my basement and cool down here. And then what you do is you just stir the dry ingredients up. That's all it is for the dry ingredients: salt, yeast, and flour. And then 2 cups of, in the summertime I might use a cooler water. This was a sort of a lukewarm, maybe not even lukewarm. This bread gets its flavor and everything from thyme. You stir it up like this, no mixer needed, and the flavor gets it because of thyme, because you really want to let this sit overnight, a good 16 hours. You can go 12 hours. The warmer it is, the quicker it's going to rise. The more yeast you use. If you need to speed this up, you want to use this in 4 to 6 hours. Use a teaspoon of yeast. Use a little bit warmer water. Just remember that, like I said, the flavor of this whole thing comes from thyme. It's not the ingredients as much as it is the thyme. But as you can see, it gets about like this. I scrape off the sides. You probably don't have to. I just noticed a little bit of flour on the bottom, so stir it a little bit more. It really doesn't matter. That's what makes this bread so easy. Is you just mix it up like that. If I wasn't doing it on this film, I'd already be done by now. And then when it's all mixed up, you just cover it with some tin foil, and voila. Now I'm going to let that sit for at least 16 hours. Like I said, maybe it'll be 14 and a half. It really doesn't matter. I'll show it to you tomorrow when it's done. Okay, and it's the next morning. It's been, gosh, I don't know, 15 hours at least. That's what it looks like. I put some flour down, and we just scrape it out of the bowl. Okay, and it's a very, very sticky dough. So what you do is you fold it over, turn it, and fold it over again. And once I get it folded over a couple times, I put the seam side down, and then I just shape it. This is the part I don't know if it really matters. I happen to like the loaves I make, so what I do is I just stretch it, and I'm pushing it down. And at this point, you could make it into any shape you wanted. I like the longer shape. It doesn't take very long, like I said. Sometimes I'll let it sit for a minute after I get it here to let it warm, to relax a little bit, but other times I just keep working it. Sort of get in the middle of the stretch. Okay. Now, I happen to have a lined pan. You could do parchment paper. You could put a little oil down. Like, I do enough baking. I bought these sheets that are nice. And okay, Looks like it's long enough. Yeah, I'm being futzy with it, but you don't need to. Sometimes I'll get it right out to the edge. Today I'm just getting it to here. It doesn't really matter. It'll turn out good regardless. I don't know if these are needed or not, but just let a little, I guess probably that's a little air out of it. But, and that's about it. The morning when you do it. Now what you need to do is you need to, I'll take this upstairs and I'll fire up my oven for about a minute. You don't want the oven hot, you just want it warm. And then you let it rise for hour and a half. It really depends. Sometimes in the wintertime things are colder, so it takes a little longer. So I'm figuring an hour and a half today. And then you'll throw it in an oven. And when you throw it in the oven, you preheat your oven at 420, and then you put a pan in the oven while it's preheating. And when you throw the dough in, you pour water in the pan, and the pan sits underneath that. And I'll film that later. It's a quick process. It's pretty easy, but basically you bake it for 30 minutes at 420, turning it after 15 minutes. That's it. Now, one other little trick I found myself is cleaning these bowls out in the sink and your brush. Make a mess of your brush. I used to. Flour's cheap enough. This is a real good trick. Throw your extra flour in here. You'll have all these little crumbs. And if you try to use a brush or whatever, it just gets coated with this stuff. And I found this to be the best way to clean it. I mean, you still have to wash it afterwards, but yeah, to get all the little stuff out, just clumps up into the flour, and it does make it a lot easier when you go to put this in the sink and clean it. But that's about it for now. Okay, there it is, risen up. I'll show you the oven real quick. That's where my pan is underneath. And then what I do is pretty simple. Throw this in. Then I grab my hot pads. And this. A lot of people, a lot of these original recipes for this were done in a pan, and the pan holds the moisture. Let's see. We're gonna set the timer for, I do 16 minutes. But yeah, a lot of people did this in a pan, and it holds the moisture. And this is a lot simpler. That way you don't have to deal with a hot pan and all that. This is just the way I like it. Okay, here it is out of the oven. It cooked about 31 minutes, somewhere in there. I always set my timers for 16 minutes because of our oven. It beeps a minute before, and then I can get up and catch it before the alarm. So it's probably a total of 31. This one's not as long as my normal ones, but it'll be tasty. It's a little fatter. Earlier in the last video, unless I spliced these together, I had said in a pan, you can cook it in a pan. This is what I meant, a Dutch oven. By doing this, you bake it covered for like 25 minutes, and then the last 5 minutes or so you bake it uncovered. The only reason I don't like doing this is, number one, I prefer the oblong loaf. But the biggest problem is it's just then you have to preheat this oven before this Dutch oven before you throw it in. And I don't really care to have to do that. It's, you risk burning yourself. And like I said, I like the loaf style. But the pan down here, I should probably turn the oven light back on. It's almost, the water's just about gone. There's just a little left. Make sure it's a nice steel pan, something that can handle the shock of the cold water. And that, just like I said, it gives the steam for it. And then it's real simple. You just let your rest for about 15 minutes, and then eat a third of the loaf with butter. Goodbye.